it works. They will want to know that they've got the rule of law, that the tax policy works, that the energy policy works. This is a message to governments, get that right and the investment will flow. So that's I have to say, when I read the report, that is the big reaction. And yes, we're going to discuss mostly, I think, the social benefits, but when we're helping to lift GDP, that translates into social benefits as well. I'm not even sure I distinguish between the two.
Yes. No, thank you very much for this response. Ryan, can I hand over to you? So who should take the initiative? Who should sort of start this? Who should start unlocking local benefits, or even sort of get this whole positive cycle going?
Thank you very much. It's so nice to have a microphone. Thank you everybody for bearing with us and moving the chairs and now still being here and listening. So who should take the lead? I think the answer to that is everybody, and I think it's about co-creation actually. The way we do it at SSE is very much place-based, and we want to ensure that through all the work we do, we spread the benefits to those that are most affected. I was sort of thinking this, and Mike, it plays a little bit to your comments. There is a role for governments and regulators here, particularly if you think of some of the work that we've done at SSE in terms of enabling companies to ring-fence funding to support local communities as they build out projects. We have a consultation actually in the UK at the moment to sort of discuss how we would do that further, particularly where you're in communities over a long period of time and you want to do something regionally rather than project by project. There's obviously a role for developers like SSE to create funds that are directed into those communities. As you mentioned, we've been investing quite a fair amount in our communities and reached £100 million earlier this year. At the very heart of this, though, has got to be the communities themselves. They are often the best place to say what it is that they should be in their community, what would help them, how that they would spread it, and how would they make sure they do it in an equitable way. And then the final sort of constituents, at least as I understand it from the way we do it at SSE, if you've got national governments, you may also have local and regional governments or local authorities, as we call them in the UK. And I think it's useful to work with them as well and to look at it not just on a project by project basis, but a regional basis, and say actually what would benefit the region in collaboration, coordination, co-creation with the communities and developer. So I think the answer is no one person has a role. I think communities absolutely have to be at the heart, but around making this successful, you create an ecosystem and everybody has a role to play.
Thank you very much for this. I think it's very much in the spirit of this COP, the focus on communities, and I'm sort of I'm listening very careful to you say it's not, you don't see that in the room here, in the rooms that you've been navigating in. You don't see enough of that community yet. So it doesn't come by itself. Yeah. Can I move on to you, Imran, and maybe share with us some of the voluntary benefit sharing models, how they translate into context with less regulatory capacity, or where you could say sort of community expectations may differ, with your own experience, of course, from Pakistan. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, and a very important question, because the voluntary benefit sharing mechanisms or the models, their implementation becomes extremely difficult and extremely challenging when there is a weak regulatory arrangement, or the choices of the communities differ from the choices of the companies or the organizations which are doing some work. Because obviously there are two partners. Whenever any company or organization comes to do any project at any area, there becomes two stakeholders. One is that company or organization, the other is the local community. The case of the organization or the company is simple, because they want to maximize their benefits, and their priority is to maximization of their benefit, and obviously their priority to give share to the local community among the in the benefits which they are accruing is obviously at the second seat. But on the other hand, the case of the community is a little bit different. But I mean, from my own experience, I can say that at times the community is very possessive about its resources, about its area, about its environment, and they don't want any external intervention to take place. And at times it also happens that the community is quite receptible towards the new development projects. But when the community is rural, when the community is underserved, so they take that implementation of that project as an opportunity, and they want to get maximum benefit from that project management, and they keep on escalating their demands and all these things. So in the absence of a good regulatory control from the government, it becomes extremely difficult. And here comes the role of the government, because government has to play on both ways. On one side, government has to provide enabling environment to the investors, so that they can come and they can invest to that area for getting some benefits or execution of the projects. Government has to have some de-risking instruments and ensuring to the investors that their investment will not go waste in it. Side by side, on the other hand, government has to manage the aspirations of the community as well, and government has to make certain regulations that the organizations or the companies who are investing something at some area, they also share the benefits of their project with the local communities and with the benefit of the local communities. So I feel that and side by side, I also feel that in addition to the government, this is a responsibility of the companies or the organizations who are going somewhere, especially to the rural or the underserved areas, to do some confidence building measures there. Because these CBMs or the confidence building measures, if started from the community, from the organization or from the companies, they immediately build a goodwill amongst the community for that investors and for that that companies. And especially when the companies, the smart companies, they start plucking the low hanging fruits, so it immediately makes a positive vibe in that area. So I think the this voluntary benefit sharing mechanism, it can work very well if the government has a regulatory control, a smart regulatory control, and the management of companies also make smart moves by making the confidence building measures. Thank you.
Can I just follow up on that and say, what is sort of the biggest sort of hurdle that one needs to pay attention to?
See, there cannot be one answer to this question, because hurdles differ from communities to communities. Some communities are culturally sensitive, some communities are religiously sensitive, some communities are quite possessive towards their resources, some communities are otherwise problematic, some communities have less education, have more suspicions, etc. So, hurdle has to be identified first, and then an appropriate response needs to be generated, keeping in view the specific needs of the community. That is why we always say that when we talk about the progress, we talk about development, it has to be community led. Bottom up approach always works. So first, need assessment has to be done, what the community requires, what the community needs, and after the proper need assessment, interventions can be planned accordingly.
Thank you very much for this response, and for reminding us that renewable energy is not just about the technology again. Can I turn to you, Mike, and ask about how do we finance this? What are some of the mechanisms, blended finance, and where does the money come from?
Well, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm now going to repeat a comment I've made once or twice in the last week as well, which is blended finance comes up in every single discussion, and I can tell you there is not enough blended finance. Excuse me. And this is becoming a real issue. The multilateral banks in total have something like 600 billion over many years. This idea that there's this unlimited pool of blended finance is not real. We need to move to a situation where exactly what we're doing here, where private investors will ultimately have to figure out how to invest without relying on either concessional finance or blended finance. They're not quite the same thing. That's not to say it's not available, it is, but in terms of the inward investment into emerging and developing markets, we're talking in excess of $1 trillion. There is no way that we have that concessional capital. The focus, and KPMG has been very involved in this particular topic and trying to think about this. We need to think about a couple of new things. First of all, and it's very evident here at COP30, the role of the insurance industry. Insurance has got a powerful role in de-risking these investments. Insurance can take technology risk, they can take project risk, they can take even political risk. Now, it's not easy, it's not cheap, but it can quite often be the difference between success and failure. And insurance will say one thing: please come to us at the start of a project, not at the end of the project. And there's insurance companies like Aon, Howdens, Zurich, many of them, they're out here at COP preaching this message about the role that they can play. The second point I would make, however, is we have to stop being afraid of investing in emerging markets. Yes, it's difficult, but there's actually been loads of success stories, and the default rates are nowhere near as bad as people think they are. So I think yes, we can use concessional capital, but more awareness from the private sector about the type of other risk mitigation solutions that are available, but also understanding that there is incredible opportunity in these markets. Just listen to the presentation that you gave. I mean, it is very, very clear, and we will, this is not going to be solved overnight. We're going to have to bring the private investor community on a journey, and we talk about emerging markets as one homogenous thing. That's far from the reality. There are certain emerging markets, particularly in Southeast Asia, a lot of investors are comfortable. Once you get the new referenced Sub-Sahara Africa in your presentation, you are into more difficult territory. So I wish I could give you a nice, easy solution all wrapped up. That's what we're working on, and that's a big part of my mission and my role in KPMG.
Yes. So what can you say what are you doing concretely?
So I'm going to give you a very real example, if I could. So one of the biggest, this is going to take 2 minutes or so, if that's okay. So one of the projects that I'm probably most excited about at the moment is work that we're doing jointly with the World Economic Forum on coal retirement. So coal is still one of the biggest sources of emissions that we have, and we're a long way from getting off coal. Now, you can't just switch off coal. You have to convert coal to renewables, or these days we've even changed our language a little bit. We talk about coal to clean, because nuclear is very much going to be part of the solution. Now, in the developing world, we still have a vast amount of coal-fired power plants in places like Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Colombia, South Africa. But with some really clever financial engineering, we can do something quite powerful. And just if I could explain this. So most of these plants are financed with fairly expensive senior debt. What we're doing is we're getting governments to help de-risk the projects, first of all, to reduce the level of risk. We're bringing in small amounts of concessional capital, and we're refinancing those projects. Now, what that does is it unlocks additional equity benefit for the owners, but there's a quid pro quo. In return for that additional equity benefit, they are obliged to shut the coal-fired plants 10 years sooner, 5 years sooner, whatever the financial model. The carbon abatement impact of that is powerful. And don't forget, recognizing the discussion we're here, you cannot just shut down a power plant. You need the replacement. The replacement is renewables. So for me, this is really doing something practical on the ground. And I was in Malaysia about 3 weeks ago. We sat down with the government of Malaysia, the World Economic Forum, and KPMG. We're going to be working on a plan on their major coal-fired plants. We need the regulator to be on board, that we can move to renewables. But again, it's a bit of clever financial engineering, and that's the type, unfortunately, it's not easy, but that's a practical example of what we're doing.
No, thank you very much for sharing that with us. I just want to, remind all of you that if you have some good questions, I will want to take those questions in a moment. I'd just like to return to you, Ryan, first to ask you about the extensive experience you have, and this is also some of the findings that we have in the report about community benefit funds. If you could let us know, how do you decide what kind of fund, community benefit funds, and when do you know when enough is enough, so to speak?
Yes, thank you very much. So when is enough enough? It's a good question, right? We actually at SSE don't define that as the sort of fixed price. We sort of take a more balanced approach where we look at the standards, we look at the requirements perhaps on us from government, we look at the local context, the local community, and then we sort of look at the sort of impact of the funds. And we have a set of principles and practices that we use that sort of standardizes our approach and makes sure it's proportionate. So for example, We do lots of consultation with communities about what it is that they want, so that again they're at the heart of this, driving and defining what it would help. And I think that extensive consultation also helps build trust between communities and SSE. We then also, as part of our process, we do quite a lot of sharing of best practice across communities and community funds, because sometimes what we find is there might be one community that's done it brilliantly and another community that's new. So we're putting a project in and they're new, and they are actually sort of they need upskilling, and so we use the sort of some of our more communities that have been through this, I guess, more mature communities, and we get them to help build capacity. And I think one of the things to bear in mind here is it's not always about the level, the sort of amount of money or funding that you're giving a community. You've also got to build capacity in those communities. It's not, you can't just sort of walk into a community and say, hey, we're going to give you, I'm making up a number, 50 million. It is true that the organisations through which you work might not have the capacity to distribute that money. So there's a bit about how do we go in early, perhaps before the projects have started, the funding's available, to make sure there's capacity in the communities to make the most of those funds. And the other principle we sort of apply is also just making it not bureaucratic. So make it easy to access. So it's not a huge long exercise and just sort of gives up hope. So by doing all of that and working with communities, it isn't like enough isn't enough. It's you end up working with the communities and coming to a place that works for both us as a developer, but also most importantly for the community.
Thank you very much for this insight from the ground, from the practice, and it takes a lot of consultations, which is in itself an investment. Yeah. Imran, can I just return to you also about, you've seen these, you've been, yourself deeply engaged in these successful community-owned micro hydro projects. And this is Pakistan. What are the experiences from Pakistan that we could dream of, that we could scale, and that could teach or sort of bring some learnings from Pakistan to the rest of the world?
Yeah, see, the installation of the installation of microhydel power projects in Pakistan is a big success. If we see, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa is a province which is the second biggest province of Pakistan, and just one organization, the Sarhad Rural Sport Program, with the assistance of government and some international agencies, has installed more than 350 microhydel power projects, generating electricity of around 50 megawatts. And the communities of around 1.5 million people are getting benefit from these microhydel power projects. And this community, the communities of the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, are basically, government had a complete comprehensive mechanism to engage them so that these microhydel power projects may be installed in a very timely way, in a very seamless manner. So if I talk about the lessons learned, what we did, there are actually 4 activities which we did, and those activities carry a lesson with them. The first and foremost thing is that government made a program called CDLD, Community Driven Local Development, under which NGOs were engaged, community-based organizations, CBOs were made. Those CBOs went home to home, house to house, talked people to people, and identified the needs of the community. And then in this way, a community was engaged in a very scientific manner, in a very socially acceptable way. Or the members of the CBOs were from the same community, so that there may not be any resistance to those kind of projects, number one. So first lesson is that the government should make some sort of regulations, and the demand of the progress or the development should be bottom up, not upside down, that someone decides at some higher fora about some community, and the community feels itself disconnected or alien to those kind of projects, number one. The second thing is that all the jobs of the lower tiers were offered to the local communities. Although the technical kind of a jobs, obviously those type of people were not available in the local communities. So those came from outside, but local kind of a jobs, all the labor kind of a jobs were offered to the local communities. And it was not just the offer of the job, rather some capacity building programs were made, and people were given the technical knowledge and technical know-how about how to run these micro hydropower projects. So in this way, the second lesson is the capacity building of the local communities, because once local communities not only getting job but also feeling that their capacity is being built, so they always have a tendency, a positive tendency, a positive vibe towards those projects. The third one was some kind of a sustainable financial model of these projects, because some money was also engaged, some money was also realized from these communities, but the parking of that money into an account and then utilization of that money was being done through the CBOs in a very transparent manner. Anyone in the community could go and check the registers, etc. And the CBOs generally used to open up the accounts, the monthly or the quarterly accounts in front of those communities, so that there should be a confidence that if money is being collected from the local communities, it is being used in a very transparent manner and it is used on them. And it is not just one penny input is equal to one penny output. If one penny input is equal to 10 pennies output. So this is how the community gets engaged in them. So the third lesson is the financial management in a sustainable and a transparent manner. And last but not the least, the government engaged the local administration, government engaged CBOs, government engaged NGOs, government engaged international partners. So with the collaboration of all the relevant stakeholders, it becomes the success story. So collaboration is the fourth and the last lesson. And now the government of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, for that matter, the government of Pakistan is scaling up this case study to the national level. The government is planning to increase the number of the micro hydropower projects from 353 currently, which are working, to more than 1,000. We are planning to, make as much megawatts of energy as possible from these micro hydropower projects. And currently, if 1 million people are getting benefit from these interventions of this micro hydropower project, so we want to give them more and more people, because many people are still off grid in Pakistan, especially in the rural areas. It becomes extremely difficult and it is very resource intensive to connect far-flung areas with the national grid. So it is extremely important that we go to the alternative sources of energy, renewable sources of energy, and using the resources which are already available. Just a little management can turn the magic on. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This is amazing. We're not talking small scale here. We are really talking like large scale. Thank you very much for sharing these examples. Really appreciate it. Now I'll turn to the floor here and invite anyone with a good question to engage here with us in the panel. Yeah, please. And please. Oh, you've got one. Thank you. A microphone is coming there behind you. Thanks.
Hi, I guess question
Please,
for the whole...
please say your name. Yeah.
I'm Isha. I'm a
cannot hear you.
biology... Can you guys hear me? Okay, yeah. I'm Isha. I'm a biology student. I guess my question is to the whole panel. It's about the scalability of bottom-up solutions. So I think what I've learned is that a lot of genuine time and investment is needed in these relationships with the community for them to be effective, because you have to rebuild trust in these relationships. And there's a lot that we have big targets to meet with the 1.5 and 2 degrees of warming and decarbonisation. So I guess I wanted to ask how this sits alongside other methods of decarbonisation that we've lost trust in, like carbon credits and offsets, and how we can scale this up. And I was at another panel talking about the importance of directly funding communities. So I guess I wanted to ask what the barriers to direct funding are and why this isn't something that's more widespread.
So, can you hear me? But just kind of just keep it. When you say direct funding by who?
By, I guess, public funds, private funds, investment,
Well,
grants.
so my simple answer to the question is, it's just not available, right? So, but I'll develop it a little bit. So the idea that the governments will just give money to communities, it happens, it does happen, but not at scale. Just to be very clear about that. The private sector and again, I'm going to be very clear, and you may not like the answer, but the private sector is motivated by economics and financial returns. What this report demonstrates is that we can generate economic returns by investing in these countries, but also, and I'm going to just double down on one point that maybe we didn't bring out clearly enough. If you're a developer moving into these countries, all developers understand you will not be successful unless you bring the community with you. It is that simple. It's as important as getting the right type of turbines or the right type of solar PV. You have to engage with the community. That's not a new thing. That, Rianne made reference, I'm from Ireland. I've been doing renewable energy for 25 years. From day one, if you didn't get the community on side, it didn't matter. And also, I'm just going to mention, also, when we talk about community, it's not just about money. I'm going to give you an example if I could. I was very fortunate to be at the very beginning of an industry and seeing it develop, and lots of twists and turns on the way, but one of the most surprising ones came when we were developing projects in the United States, and we kept running into the same issue, which was sacred burial grounds, in tribal Indian grounds, and fascinating, and this delayed projects for years. But it was all about, so the community wasn't necessarily looking for money, they were looking for respect and understanding of their culture and traditions. And I have an expression which is that there's no energy transition unless it's a just transition. And coincidentally, we're here in the Panda Pavilion today. In KPMG, we've joined up with WWF and UNDP on a concept called the Alliance for a Just Energy Transformation. So you speak about scale, and look it up, it's called AJET. What this concept is about is that it just becomes part of every single investment decision. So we're at the beginning of a journey. You do not make the investment decision unless you take the just piece into account. And the just piece very definitely includes not just employees, which you referenced as well in the report, it definitely includes the community.
And I'm going to build on that a little bit. I mean, I agree with you, and you put it rightly. Developers know they can't build their projects unless they have community buy-in. So I think it's sort of like a license to be able to do your project. You mentioned the need to rebuild trust. I think that is true for some projects, but what I've been struck, and I'm only 10 days into the role, but one of the things I've been struck by is actually in a company like SSE in the north of Scotland, how ingrained in the communities they are. So we have, the company itself is part of the community, it lives in the community, it understands the community, and I think that gives it a unique ability then to think about, well, actually what would benefit this community as we build these projects. And to your point, Mike, as well about this isn't always about money. One of the things that we're doing in the north of Scotland, we'll be in a community. One of the challenges in rural communities is housing. So rather than direct money or funding, what we're going to do is build housing. We're going to use the houses in the accommodation in the first place for the workers who are going to be building the project, but we will then leave and those houses will be available to community, because what we know they need most of all is housing in rural communities. So it's a good example of where it's not always about money, it's about how else do you contribute to a community.
And that's also back to your point about local, sort of, it matters locally, context, whatever, yeah. Please say your name. And
yes. Hi, my name is Efonya Michapia. I come from Ghana and I work with the Green Africa Youth Organization. I think I work more on microgrids and communities as well, and also on the workforce and transition. I want to understand, most of the times we talk about the risk in finance, and I hear it a lot, but maybe more at times it's more sentimental to Africa and the global south. I just want to understand what we mean by the risk in finance, and why is it that Africa is more looked at as a risky area than other places. Thank you.
So one of the things, you can hear me? So one of the things I said when I don't know were you here, when I made my original contribution, maybe I'm getting mixed up between panels, and this question comes up all the time. I believe there's a real difference between perceived risk and real risk. And I spoke about the importance of creating awareness that actually, and I'm going to talk about Africa specifically, there's way too much negativity in the global community. Yes, there are issues, but also there's incredible opportunities. And I'm going to give you the reality first of all. The reality is, when I talk to private investors, and I'm taking some of the big private equity funds, in their mindset, we don't even touch Africa. We don't go near Africa. And part of my mission is we have to change that mindset. So it is a perception that if you invest, that there are real issues. Now, there are some very significant issues. I'm going to tell you one in particular, probably the single biggest issue. It's foreign currency volatility. That hurts investors in a really major way. Now, there are mitigating solutions, but they will only take you so far. So we also have to be honest that there are real issues, but there are lots of other issues that are not real. We do need to place our faith in the governments of across Africa, that they are going to recognize the importance of foreign investment, bring in the right type of policy environment. And I look at countries like Rwanda. It's a fantastic success story. South Africa has done I've been doing renewable energy in South Africa for many years, but the problem is too many people have this negative impression, which is not fair. And as I said earlier, we just need to work, and this is one of the good things about COP. We need to work to change the narrative. And one thing I would ask people to look at two things actually, now that I think of it. Look at the default rating for projects in Africa. It is just as good as or as bad as any other part of the world. So it's been unfairly categorized. The second I'm going to make a slightly technical point, and this is nothing to do with Africa. This is a problem very much in the West. For project finance, for projects in Africa, the country rating is important, because if the country rating, you cannot get project finance at a rating higher than the country rating. That's just a part of banking law. And the lower your rating, the more expensive the finance is. So we've got some structural problems in the West, and there's some other more technical issues as well. I think we keep saying the problem is Africa. I'm not convinced. Sometimes the problem is back at our own doorstep. And this, for me, on the climate agenda, this is the big challenge. And this piece of work is very much contributing to thinking about the challenge, because if you can get local communities involved, it gets investors more comfortable, it gets the developers more comfortable. But I'll be honest with you, we have a bit of a journey to travel.
Thank you indeed for this. I have one final comment from you.
Thank you. I'm Thomas. I work for an investment company that invests in renewable energy in the Global South. One of the questions I had was, there seems to be sometimes a scale mismatch between massive utility scale projects that are usually planned at national level and the need to distribute benefits at the local level. And one of the problems that investors face is when it is up to them to implement properly the local benefit sharing, because there is no fiscal mechanism in sharing the benefits between the local community that's being affected and the planner who concentrates the fiscal resources from those projects. So have you seen ways in how this can be overcome so that you avoid having badly implemented CSR with no regulatory oversight, which is in the end just responsibilizing only the investor or the developer?
Thank you indeed.
Yeah. Well, a very pertinent and a very important question, because you have to have certain specific mechanisms. If I talk about the example from Pakistan, obviously initially when this whole system started, there was an issue that because the general or the routine instruments which are available, or the routine mechanisms of the currency flow, or the routine mechanisms of the banking systems which are available, those would not be available for the local communities. So for this purpose, you have to have certain specific and target-oriented kind of mechanisms which are acceptable to the local communities and which are also compliant to the overall legal framework of that country. So that is extremely important. As I told earlier in my example about the finances thing, that certain specific bank accounts were formed. And then there was a certain mechanism which included the role of the district administrations, the local administrations, the local community-based organizations, the NGOs, as well as the investors, etc. So all of them sit together and they decide that this money has been parked in certain bank or something like that, and these will be the people who will be the co-signatories of the checks, so that the transparency and everything and all those corners get remain booked. And the identification of projects are being done in a very consultative way. So you are absolutely right. You are hitting the bullseye that if we say that the routine, normal mechanisms would work in such communities, in such environments, so the answer is a big no. It would not be possible. Under the regulatory framework of government, certain specific mechanisms have to be evolved for successful implementation of such projects. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this response also. Thank you to everyone here for coming, for joining us, even in these, difficult circumstances, if I could say, with hearing. Thank you for staying with us. And I also want to send a big thank you back to Professor Sam Funkhauser at Oxford University for leading this project over the past 3 years, and he is unstoppable. So this will continue, this good work. So thank you very much for joining us, and thank you to all of you here, brilliant panelists, for engaging and sharing your knowledge and experiences with us here today. I also want to say that all of you who have registered for this this event will receive a link on your emails to the full report, which is available today. I'm also happy to say it's already, I read this morning on LinkedIn that there's already some buzz out there about some of the results in some of the media out there in the global world. Then finally at 5 o'clock this afternoon here in this blue zone at the GAUC Pavilion, love to invite you all for a drink. Oxford University is inviting you. If you want to continue this conversation or other related conversations, you are all invited. 5 o'clock today. Thank you again to everyone.